back of my neck getting dirty pretty. Bend down, isn't it a pity? Doesn't seem to be a shadow in the city.
Thank you, Milton. All right, nicely done. Right in the middle. Okay, hello class. I hope everybody is doing well. And this is our continuation of our microeconomics class. We're gonna finish up. Again, we're gonna touch on externalities, types of goods, go in a little bit more detail with basic union power and in collective bargaining, and pretty much these are things that a lot of you probably already know. And then with voting, I think a lot of this is already common sense that you pretty much know anyway. So, all right, so we'll get into it. So negative, we got externalities. And remember, we have negative externalities and positive externalities. An externality is a cost or a benefit that is put upon a third party, inflicted upon, or a third party, if it's a benefit, enjoys, that is an uncompensated cost or benefit, okay? So, to discourage negative externalities, typically governments will tax, all right? And positive externalities, they want to promote. So they want to advance those, and we would call that some kind of a subsidy. All right? Now, if we wanted to add up the costs and the benefits of a certain negative externality and how the government's trying to correct it, you would basically take the dollar amount of the tax, multiply it by the companies that are involved, and the benefit, and multiply it by the population. Now, in your book, we have to be careful. Sometimes some of the questions you're going to come across may not be typed correctly, but you just have to kind of overlook that. All right? Okay, so for the government, if they wanted to increase, let's say there was not necessarily a public good, but a good that would benefit the public, society in general. All right, well, what does governments do? Well, they would give out patents, copyrights. They would, do a lot of things in order to expand that positive externality. Also, you want to remember that, how does governments, can they affect research and development? Yes, they can subsidize research and development, or through government actions if they can make capital equipment. Now, this would be more reflective of a free market, but remember, if capital equipment is at a lower price, well, it's going to help research and development. You're going to have more research and development if the capital equipment that they need is going for a lower price, all right? But you can have an out-and-out government policy of a subsidy directly to research and development. All right, so we've got, in your textbook, they went into the laws that control pollution. I remember when the very first Clean Air Act went into place, and everybody thought, wow, it's kind of revolutionary, but thank God we had those coming in. There's a number of different ways and techniques to control pollution. We can just out and out say, all right, this is the amount of pollution that's going to be allowable. So that's limiting the quantity of pollution. A number of these would fall under command and control, okay? Also, there would be a tax. For instance, when we have one right now, tax to control pollution. Well, look at the 10 cents that we have on our cans or our bottles. Some 5 cents, some 10 cents. Well, you can look at that as a tax so that we don't pollute the countryside with cans and bottles. Now, going back many years, I can remember folks talking about this issue, saying they were so tired of seeing all the cans and bottles littered on the roadside. Well, that 10 cents and 5 cent tax, for lack of a better term, did improve the litter. So it did help eliminate that negative externality. All right, then there's marketable permits. All right, so companies, you are allowed to pollute up to a certain extent, and you are encouraged to improve your process. This happened when companies that have the least expensive methods to control pollution, they will control it the most, and that would fall under marketable permits. And sometimes these permits can be sold or traded. All right. All right. Now in the 1960s and 70s, there was the regulations that were put in. I would have to say, to my feeling, that would be command and control. However, I guess the other term that can be used is positive regulations. So positive regulations, I myself would probably tend to use command and control, but you use positive regulations, all right? Okay, brings us to goods, okay? Public, private, club goods, and common resources. Okay, public goods, national defense. Remember the two criteria: are they rivalrous in consumption, and are they excludable? Public goods, like national defense, are non-rival and non-excludable. Okay? Okay, this brings us to an interesting point. If we had a very huge public park, and I mean huge, in relationship to the size of the population, you could consider that a public good, okay? It would be non-rivalrous and non-excludable. However, remember, if we were just talking about a regular park, maybe an average or just a smaller sized park that's servicing an entire area, think about that for a minute. That you may not be able to exclude folks, but is there rivalry in consumption? And the answer is yeah, absolutely. So remember, if you see something that says, well, okay, we've got a park here, and is it rivalrous in consumption and excludable? Well, it's non-excludable, but unless it's a tremendously huge park, yeah, there's going to be rivalry in consumption. I live in for the longest time when we were raising our children, we lived in a city on the east side that had a very small park. And that, if you got about 8 or 9, 10 families who were having family reunions, there was definitely a rivalry in consumption. So remember that, okay? Private goods, again, and we talked about this, they're the most efficient, okay? They are excludable and rivalrous. There are no efficiencies in private goods. Public goods, there was the inefficiency that companies didn't want to supply it, an inefficient low production, or some there'd be an inefficient high consumption. That would be something like a common resource. Common resource think of it as the fish in the lake. You can overfish it, so the inefficiency is there. All right? Okay, so I think we're pretty well set with these. Last video we talked about, they were in our textbook, they compared a monopsony, which is one buyer of labor, and pretty much they would have their way unless they came across a union, okay? Now, let's say the union did have control over, the labor force. Well, now we've got two with market power. So what does the union do? They combine, and this is pretty much common sense. The union combines the labor collectively, and when they get together with the company, that's why we call it collective bargaining, all right? Which you've heard this term probably many times in the past. All right, and just like the company has market power, a union, when they have all the memberships, together, that gives them tremendous bargaining power, all right? And for better outcomes. The more bargaining power they have, obviously, the stronger their position is. All right. And let's say, and things were rolling on, let's say we're in the 1950s and the early 1960s, and the UAW and the Big Three, the UAW had a pretty good lock on the industry. And again, we're not saying this is good, bad, or indifferent. We're just stating the facts. But what happened in the 70s? Well, in the 70s, we saw more and more foreign influence, foreign cars coming in. A lot more imports. What did that do? Well, again, it doesn't take an economist to figure this out. You've got more imports coming in, so there's going to be less UAW jobs, right? Okay, and that's exactly what happened. So foreign imports meant that the membership of the UAW was going to get smaller and smaller. And domestic output, of GM, Ford, Chrysler, it's going to go down, right? Okay. So that takes, again, this is pretty much not common sense, but it's something that you've heard of already quite a bit. Labor discrimination. Well, we talked about price discrimination. Labor discrimination is if you take, folks that have basically the same skill sets and you pay them differently. Whether you don't like a certain nationality or, if it's a man versus a woman. By the way, my 7 daughters are very, very big on equal pay for equal work, whether it's a man or a woman. So I'm a great proponent of that. Anyway, labor discrimination is you take folks with the same skill set and you pay them differently. All right? All right, then we'll finish up with voting. Well, and again, a lot of this you probably already know that, a very large percentage of our population, I think from your textbook it said, we get maybe 55% of the people who vote. So that leaves so many people. Why? Why don't they vote? Well, they're saying, you're thinking it, I don't know, it just costs too much. I got to take some time off from work. I've got to go to the polling booth and this and that. So I just assume not even get involved with it. Okay? They call rational ignorance, okay? Because they feel that it's going to cost, the cost is just too much. And on top of it, they feel that, well, it's one vote. There's hundreds of thousands of votes. It's not going to matter. So that's why we get a lot of folks not voting. Okay, they cite Walden and talking about you have a better chance. They're talking about being killed on the way to the voting booth. as opposed to your vote? Well, that would illustrate the principle of utility maximizing consumer. Well, if he feels that his vote isn't really going to count, or it's not going to influence the election, he's just going to, again, remember we talked about you're trying to maximize your happiness with your decisions? Well, it's the same thing. A utility maximizing consumer typically then is not going to vote. What do governments do? Well, they advertise. You see the advertisements on TV, especially towards when it gets closer to the election, and a lot of times they will try to have folks feel connected to society. All right, feel that, hey, you are a part of this, the society of the United States. So vote. Your vote counts. And since you are a part of U.S. society, you need to vote. They do it because, quite honestly, it's a toughie. There's hasn't been a lot of success in a lot of the other attempts to get people to vote. So they're trying this, being connected to society. All right. Then they talked about special interests. Well, special interests have a huge influence, not only on voting, but on what laws are going to pass. Why do you think we pay double the price for sugar than the world market? It's because the sugar lobby is so strong in Washington, D.C. All right? So, would they be a special interest? You bet your life. But in the context of voting, there would be a special interest group, supporting one industry or another. They might be a small group. Well, the sugar lobby is a good example. There's a small group, but do they have influence? They have some tremendous influence, far that exceeds their number. Okay, but anyway, that would be something to look at, special interests. And again, you probably already know this, but I wanted to bring it up to you one more time, okay? This is a short lecture. We'll have at least one more, probably two, but at least one more before the end of the semester. And I just want to, make sure we've got everything covered in the textbook. If any of you have any questions or any issues, just please email me. I'm still expecting some assignments. A lot of you have cleaned up some assignments. I'm still expecting a few more. So let's get those in. We've got 2 more weeks, and I'd like to see everybody finish strong. Everybody's been doing, pretty darn well. So I'm happy with the class. Okay, so that's it for today. Stay well. I will be putting up at least 1, probably 2 more before the semester's out. Okay? All right. So you take care, everybody. Be well.